Welcome to Front Office Pros. Today, we're going to be going through some Week 11 waiver wire players.
Hike!
Joe, hard to believe we're already in Week 11, and I don't know about you, but it seems like the waiver wire is getting thinner and thinner by the week. But we got another 5 guys that we're talking about. The first one we're going to be talking about here, quarterback Russell Wilson, the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's taken over the reins as a starting quarterback over the past 3 weeks. Not including, including the bye, it's been the past 4 weeks, but in playing the past 3 weeks. And, did pretty well at the Commanders, which was a decent team. They're going to be battle tested now, or we're going to find out if they're battle tested. I should say these next few weeks, they got a bunch of divisional opponents. But Russ ended up having, 14 for 28, 195 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception. But he did much better than some other players. I'll tell you what, I wish I had him instead of Aaron Rodgers. He did a complete dud for me this week. So what are your thoughts on Russell Wilson here? He seems to be, honestly, he's been getting around at least 200 something yards, in for multiple touchdowns at this point. What do you think about Russ? Are you spending FAAB to get him?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, just this past league, in our league we're in, I spent $3 to go ahead and get him. So I think anywhere from $0 to $5, I think is probably fair for him. I do think he's an interesting possible streaming quarterback moving forward. You mentioned it. They're not asking him to throw for a ton of yards, but the fact that he keeps getting these touchdowns, and now you add a guy like Mike Williams to the wide receiver room, and he likes to throw the moon balls. That's what Mike Williams likes to do. It's also what George Pickens likes to do. He had a touchdown in this game as well. So I think, especially for this upcoming week against the Ravens, I think Russ is going to be a good play next week.
Not to mention he's got the Ravens twice remaining. He's got the Bengals. Right. Eagles are susceptible, I think, also to the pass. So, so he's got some interesting matchups down the stretch here. I agree with you. I think that sounds about right. I mean, I like having multiple quarterbacks. I know it can be agonizing sometimes, especially when you get it wrong. But even if you have the best of quarterbacks, sometimes the matchups just look dire, and you're like, I don't really want to play them. So it's good to have options, I think. Although, it can frustrate you if you pick the wrong one. What if you have Dak Prescott and you had him, right? And you just worked out that way that Russell Wilson was on the wire, that you were able to pick him up. But if that wasn't the case, then you'd be in some serious trouble.
Yeah, because outside of that, the options were, bleak, especially, Jameis Winston was out there, but him being on bye, that the guys being on bye, if they were wrinkling the things. So, yeah, Russ was definitely the best option.
And you never know. I mean, you're seeing more and more quarterbacks get injured now, especially in super flex league. If this guy isn't taken, you got to go get him. I don't know. I would think he's already rostered, but you're seeing Trevor Lawrence. They're talking about him possibly being done for the year. You're talking about Dak Prescott being done for the year. And as we get, later on here, it's going to become more bleak, as different quarterbacks, are just not as involved, or they end up, they say, hey, this guy's done for the year. They just say, hey, it's time to hang him up for the year. So right now things are still competitive, but hey, it's week 11. When we get closer to week 14, week 15, week 16, you just never know.
Yeah, for sure. And, speaking on those other quarterbacks that are getting hurt, I'm not sure I'm rushing to the Superflex waiver wire for, Mac Jones or Cooper Rush at this point.
No, yeah, and depending on, exactly. You'd probably be better off playing somebody other than those guys.
Yeah, I mean, they did have some tougher matchups this week. We'll see if they rebound, but definitely didn't look the best.
Are you enjoying this episode so far? Well, if you are, subscribe to our YouTube channel, smash that like button, and hit the notification bell for upcoming videos. We do videos throughout the year, so you're not going to want to miss what we have in store. So the next player we're going to be talking about here, Joe, is running back Audric Estime of the Denver Broncos. He's a guy who we've kind of had our eyes on. We haven't talked about him yet. But if you listen to anything that Sean Payton has to say, which, you have to be prepared if you want to listen to one of his press conferences, he'll take you on a wild ride. But he's been kind of saying as much that Audric Estime was going to start to be more and more involved in this team. We didn't know if it was just fanfare or was it actually going to be reality. But he did quite well. At Kansas City, that's not the easiest of matchups. Now, he doesn't involved. He hasn't been involved as much in the passing game, so that is kind of limits his upside. They had 14 carries for 53 yards. Tough bruising running back, which has really been meant for Javonte Williams. What are your thoughts, Joe? I think this is kind of an anticipatory move. If you look at the box score, you look at his fantasy points, it wasn't anything great, but it looks like he's getting more and more involved in the offense going forward.
Yeah, I mean, definitely, he definitely has. I mean, just this week alone, they said wanted to get him more touches. Well, he had 14 carries for 53 yards. You mentioned it. ESPN, had the Chiefs rush defense ranked #1. So I think for him to average almost 4 yards a carry against that, Chiefs run defense on the road was pretty impressive. And he just continued to show he was a tough runner. And just on the flip side, Javonte Williams came off of, week 8 against the Panthers. He had 17 touches. Last week against the Ravens, he had 12 to 1 carry. And then he added a couple of receptions. I mean, it looks like Javonte is going to be involved in like the 2-minute and more of the passing situations. But it looks like, Sean Payton is always kind of 50-50 what you can believe or not. But it does seem like Estime wants Estime to be the guy rolling forward. So I do think he's worth a stash. I don't know if he's the guy that you're going to like add and be able to play right away, but I think it's continue to monitor, and you might have something like you said, hope I would really try to get this guy, being that it's anticipatory move, like for $0, but maybe your league doesn't allow it. I think he's worth at least a couple bucks anyways.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. He only had 1 carry. I mean, that's kind of jarring when you say it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that, but
no,
1 carry, 2 catches for 6 yards. I mean, he really was not involved at all.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to spend too much. Only rostering 7% of sleeper leagues, and next week, the Broncos are going to be playing the Falcons at home, but Falcons have been kind of a stingy run defense, so I don't know how well he'll do in the next matchup, but I think you're right. I think he's a good stash player at this point.
Yeah, I mean, he's 1.1% rostered in the ESPN league, so if your league does allow for the $0 FAABs, that's what I would do.
All right, so next play we're going to be talking about, you mentioned it already, Joe, the new hookup in Pittsburgh, and that's wide receiver Mike Williams. He was traded from the New York Jets to the Pittsburgh Steelers. They had talked about that they were going to ease him in. We may not see Mike Williams all that much, right away anyways. And we didn't, but he did maximize his opportunities with the 1 target he got, which was for 32 yards and a touchdown. Only rostered in 20% of sleeper leagues. I'm curious how much FAAB you spend on him. I think anywhere from 3 to 5. I think he becomes a flex play. He's got flex appeal, especially considering the matchups. And you're right. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, you alluded to it anyways. At the top of the episode here. It really does fit more of Russ's style. Russ loves to throw the moon balls. That's what George Pickens is good at. That's what Mike Williams is good at. Much better fit for Mike Williams than what he was doing with the New York Jets and the dumpster fire that's over in Gotham City.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, he only had the 1 catch for 32 yards and a touchdown, but that's the type of I do expect him to be more involved, like you mentioned. So reception numbers should go up, targets as well. But the fact that his 1 catch was a touchdown, I think is indicative of what they want to do. And as they get close, they like to take the shots. I mean, who better to take it to than a couple of big guys like Mike Williams and George Pickens. And just as far as roster percentage goes on ESPN, 25.4% rostered there. And I agree with you. I think 3 to 5% is a pretty fair number.
You could do a whole lot worse on your bench and for your flex appeal who you're going to play. So to me, I mean, they're not the most high-powering offense Pittsburgh is, and I don't think that they're going to throw all that much. I mean, it's going to be a balance between the run and the throw. But, there's not a lot of options outside Pickens in that passing offense. So Mike Williams I think, is a good one to go get.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And, maybe you need a bye week fill-in. And like as we mentioned at the top 2, I mean, the fact that you get the Baltimore Ravens, in which you would think that it could be a higher scoring game and Steelers might have to pass more. And, Arizona Cardinals, Panthers, Giants, Buccaneers all in bye. Probably more so affects you if you got Marvin Harrison Jr. or, one of the passing options for the Bucs as far as that goes. But I think Williams would be a great fill-in for any of those guys.
Next player we're going to be talking about, and I honestly can't believe we're even mentioning his name, is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the New Orleans Saints. He was on the Bills, was released after the trade for Amari Cooper. Now that he's on the Saints, he's basically the number one receiver. I mean, for all intents and purposes, Chris Olave is done for the year. Has had multiple concussions. Everything that we can tell from social media and his brother and everything else that's being said is this sounds like Chris Olave may have no desire to want to come back to this squad. I mean, although they beat Atlanta today, which I think you and I were both surprised, this team is the outside looking in. Don't see them being really a playoff threat at this point. So at this point, I would say that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is the number one option, which is hard to believe. With also Rashid Shaheed also on IR. He had 3 catches with under 3 targets, 109 yards and 2 touchdowns. Is this just the Marquez Valdes-Scantling, like surprise week where he just goes off, or is this something that's sustainable? Should people really consider adding Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Joe?
Yeah, I think I'd be adding him, just because, as you mentioned it, I mean, the Saints have had such bad injuries to the wide receiver position. I do think there's a strong possibility, Olave doesn't come back this year, just with his history of concussions. This was already the 3rd one in this calendar year, let alone the previous ones he's had in college and in previous NFL seasons. But this guy is 0.6% rostered in the ESPN leagues. And, I would think possibly this might just be like one of those flash in the pan games if he was on a different team. But the fact that he was with the Saints, and I really think he just takes over that Rashid Shaheed role that we saw earlier in the year, where I mean he started off the season with Shaheed did with 3 catches, 73 yards and a touchdown, 4 for 96 and a touchdown after that, where he's averaged these long balls and getting in the end zone. I think there could be some staying power with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and just upcoming schedule that they got. They just played the Falcons. They got the Browns, then a Week 12 bye. But after that, the Rams, the Giants, Commanders, Packers, and Raiders. There's some favorable matchups mixed in there as well, where I do think, Valdes-Scantling, oddly enough, could be an option for you.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go nuts. I probably would say, $2 to $5. I would prioritize Mike Williams over Marquez Valdes-Scantling, but also could definitely see take the flyer on him, because you never know. Like you said, there could be some staying power here.
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally you could get him for $0, but I do tend to agree with you. I mean, I'm not going crazy. Max would definitely be 5, so anywhere from the 0 to 5% mark would definitely be fair, I think.
So last player we're going to be talking about here is wide receiver Adonai Mithcell of the Indianapolis Colts, with Mike Pittman being Michael Pittman. He's usually called Mike that often, but Michael Pittman is dealing with a back issue. There's talked about him being on injured reserve. Wasn't put on injured reserve. Was inactive today against the Buffalo Bills. So we don't really know if, honestly, Michael Pittman's reliable at this point. So now you've got the mixture of Josh Downs, Alec Pierce, and which we talked about both of them. But we haven't talked about Adonai Mithcell. Kind of had his coming out party. 6 targets, 6 catches for 71 yards. Just looked, pretty good, honestly, when you saw him. Made definitely some flashes. Was the intrigue of why in some dynasty leagues people are really interested in him. So, what are your thoughts here on Adonai Mithcell, Joe? I mean, he's got some interesting matchups down the road here. I mean, he's got the Jets, who are an absolute sieve right now. You got the Detroit Lions. You got at New England, which depending on whoever Christian Gonzalez covers, which I don't think it'll be Mithcell. He could have an opportunity. He's got Denver's a tough matchup, but if Patrick Surtain is on one of the better receivers, and that still opens up Adonai Mithcell. Then you got the Titans and at the Giants. So in their bye week in week 14. But what are your thoughts on Mithcell here?
Yeah, I think at this point, based on their roster ability, somebody's got to step up in this, Indianapolis Colts offense. Pittman, I know he was out this past week. Not sure what his injury, like how long he's going to be out for, but the back is kind of a nagging injury. He's been trying to play through it. Even last week when he tried to play through it, he wasn't really involved in the offense. I mean, Mithcell was targeted 6 times, caught all 6 for 71 yards in this game. I think he's a decent PPR option, just because I'm not like he hasn't quite got the touchdowns down yet. That's more the Alec Pierce role, which I do think he's also worth a pickup if he's out there. But in PPR leagues, I think you could do a lot worse than Adonai Mithcell is. He might just, eat up the targets and eat up those receptions where Pierce and some of those other guys are, typically more of the deep ball threats.
Yeah, I would say anywhere around 2 to 5% for him too. I probably would put him third amongst those. I think I would put MVS ahead of him. But you have to remember something. When we get to this late in the year, this is the time where rookies get increased snaps. They get some more opportunities. They understand the playbook more. They start to have those opportunities. So, we haven't seen a lot from Mitchell up until this point, really. And this might be the beginning. And that's where I think it's worth kind of taking a flyer to go get him because it may be just at that point where it's like, okay, Mitchell started to finally get it. We're going to give him more opportunities.
And I think this is just also starting to be the time where you kind of got to call your shots and make these anticipatory plays because the waiver wire is, drying up week after week. It's becoming harder for us to pick out 5 guys to talk about. And I think you just got to be, try to stay 1 week ahead of the game and go ahead and just get these guys in your rosters. Even if you're not going to play them, stash them on your bench if you got the bench spots. There's been plenty of injuries this year as well. So, people should have room.
So that does it for this episode. We talked about.
Before we end it, though, Steve.
Oh, boy.
I talk about it being anticipatory. I was pretty impressed by it tonight. We're not sure what Nico Collins, if he's going to be back next week or not. But John Metchie is a guy to keep your eye on as well.
Oh, what's your thoughts on John Metchie for the folks at home?
Yeah, I just, watching him this game, the Lions, there definitely was like a rapport going on between him and Stroud. He was more of like the number one read in a lot of these slant plays. He had a nice long gain in the game. Found himself to get a touchdown as well. Without Stephon Diggs, I feel like he might be could take over that slot role with Stephon Diggs. I know Hutchinson got a couple of deep ball looks, but he wasn't consistent. Metchie in this game, he had 6 targets, 5 catches for 74 yards and a touchdown. He kind of was pretty impressive to me, and he's just somebody to monitor as the Texans try to figure out how to navigate the injuries they've been experiencing.
That was well worth, pumping the brakes there before the end of the episode here. You're definitely right on that. Only roster in 3% of sleeper leagues. Guy who had a lot of talent. I believe he was a second-round pick coming out of Alabama. Obviously, dealt with, I think it was the leukemia or the cancer that he dealt with, and now, he's finally back. He had his first career touchdown. So, again, talented player in Alabama, has had those different life situations that have led him not to be able to be on the field. Now, obviously, healthy, doing well. So this could be, now Detroit's obviously not the, their deep pass defense isn't the greatest, as far, they allow receivers to do pretty well. But he's got some good matchups. He's got Dallas next week. He's got Jacksonville, got Miami, got Baltimore on championship day, week, I should say. So, could be an interesting opportunity with Diggs out for the year. You're going to have to fill those roles somehow. So if you got Tank Dell, you've got Nico Collins coming back, doesn't mean that John Metchie can't continue to stay relevant. Yeah,
that's what I think too. And we don't know how 100% Nico Collins is when his hamstrings are tricky as well. So at the least, talking about a guy who is 0.5 rostered in ESPN, he's definitely worth it. We're talking about stashes here being 1 week ahead. I think he's worth a stash.
So now this does it for this episode. We gave you 6 players with that extra one with John Metchie that we think could be very valuable to have on your benches. You want to go and get those guys. Thank you so much for tuning in, and until next time.